Dean Martin talked about the Hollywood actors he thought were bad people. A lot of people in the United States loved Dean Martin. He was a cool guy. Dean Martin had a voice, and he always seemed to be having a good time. He would walk into a room with a drink in his hand and a smile on his face. It was like he knew a secret that nobody else knew. Dean Martin saw a lot of things that went on behind the scenes in Hollywood. He knew some actors who were not very nice people. Dean Martin saw the side of these actors when they were not in front of the camera. Dean Martin saw it all. He remembered everything, said a person who was really close to the Rat Pack for a long time. Dean Martin played a guy on stage, but really he was very sharp and noticed everything. People liked Dean Martin because he was easy to talk to, so they would let their guard down when they were around Dean Martin. Famous people who seemed perfect in public would show Dean Martin who they really were, and they did not even know that Dean Martin was paying attention and remembering things. Now we're going to talk about 10 actors that Dean Martin thought were really bad people in Hollywood. Number 1. Wallace Beery. Wallace Beery was a man who seemed tough. Wallace Beery was an actor who became very popular in the 1930s and early 1940s. People loved watching Wallace Beery in movies because he was good at playing men who were rough on the outside but kind on the inside. Wallace Beery did a job in a movie called The Champ. Wallace Beery made people think he was a softy who just acted mean sometimes. The people who worked with Wallace Beery said that was not true at all. They said Wallace Beery was actually very different from the characters he played in movies. This person was really mean, liked to pick on people. He was a guy over 6 feet tall and really heavy, around 250 pounds. The person used his size to scare and hurt everyone around the person. The person was like a bully who did this to people all the time. Dean Martin said that Wallace Beery was a pig who got away with everything. An entertainment historian who knows a lot about Dean Martin's career and the people he worked with said this. This is not about Wallace Beery being really rude or doing bad things at work. Dean Martin thought that Wallace Beery did some bad things that were against the law. The movie studios covered these things up for a time. The worst things that people said about Wallace Beery were about the death of a comedian named Ted Healy. Ted Healy was the person who came up with the Three Stooges. There are rumors that have been going around Hollywood for a time. These rumors say that Beery was involved in a fight with Healy. This fight happened outside the Trocadero nightclub in 1937. Some people who work in the industry are saying that Beery was part of a group that hurt Healy badly. Healy died a days later. The official reason for his death was because of problems related to drinking much alcohol. However, many people do not believe this because of when it happened and what was going on at the time. Many people think it is suspicious that Healy died soon after the fight with Beery and the others. The rumors about Beery and the fight with Healy have been around for a time, and many people are still talking about it. Number 2. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was a singer. Not many famous people have had a difference between how they seem to the public and how they really are, like Bing Crosby. To a lot of people, Bing Crosby was the voice they heard at Christmas, the smart and kind father figure from the movie Going My Way, and the singer who made everything sound easy and like he was at peace. What people saw was not what his son said was really going on with Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby had a way of making people think he was one way, but it was not true. Bing Crosby was very different at home. The father was a parent who hurt his kids in ways. He was mean to them, made them feel bad about themselves. This man was very strict, wanted everything to be perfect, which was very hard on his kids. The way he treated them has stayed with the kids for a time and still affects them today. The father's behavior was very bad, has had a lasting impact on his kids. Dean Martin had a view of Crosby because they were both singers and actors. People who knew Dean Martin said that he thought Crosby was a strange person. Dean Martin supposedly told his friends that Crosby had a voice, but as a person he was cold. Gary Crosby wrote about his childhood in his book, Going My Way. He said he was always scared when he was a kid. Bing Crosby had a room in his house where he kept trophies. He also used this room to punish his sons when they did something wrong. After he punished them, he expected them to stop crying and act like nothing was wrong. Dean Martin thought this was very disturbing about Crosby. Crosby was a person, and Dean Martin did not understand him. Martin was a man who loved his kids very much. He just did not understand why Crosby acted the way he did. What really bothered Martin was that Crosby said one thing but did another. Crosby seemed like a guy to the public. He appeared to be warm and patient and have a lot of advice for people who were parents. Martin did not think this was really true. He thought Crosby was hiding who he really was. Martin believed that Crosby was using the fact that people in America trusted him to hide the fact that he was not a good person. Crosby's behavior was the opposite of what people thought he was like. Martin thought this was very wrong. Martin thought that Crosby was doing something by pretending to be someone he was not. Number 3. Errol Flynn, the guy who played the boy pirate. When you saw Errol Flynn in movies like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, he seemed like a cool hero. Errol Flynn was good at doing things, and he had a lot of charm, which made people think he was the perfect action hero in the 1930s and 1940s. The truth is, Errol Flynn was not a very nice person. He did some things that even the people in Hollywood thought were wrong. Some people who knew Dean Martin said that Errol Flynn was a man who used his charm and fame to do some very bad things to people. Errol Flynn's behavior was really disturbing. It is surprising that people did not know about it sooner. Martin told his friends that they would not want their sisters to be around Flynn. This is because Flynn was in a lot of trouble. He had to go to court in 1943 for doing very bad things to young girls. Even though the court said he did not do anything, many women said that Flynn did some very bad things to them. He forced them to do things they did not want to do. He did not care about how they felt. Martin thought that Flynn's behavior was very bad. What really bothered Martin was that the people in charge of the movie studio where Flynn worked wanted to keep everything quiet. They wanted to protect Flynn and make sure that people did not find out about the things he did. They wanted to keep making money from Flynn's movies. Martin did not like that the movie studio was more worried about making money from Flynn than about the things he did to women. Number 4. Adolphe Menjou, the informer. People saw Adolphe Menjou as a sophisticated guy. He played gentlemen and important people in movies like The Front Page and Paths of Glory. Adolphe Menjou was not just this fancy guy. He was actually very involved in the McCarthy-era blacklist. Adolphe Menjou did this by telling the House Un-American Activities Committee about people he thought were a problem. That is how Adolphe Menjou got his reputation, by naming names and getting people in trouble. Martin said that Menjou was a person who could hurt people with a smile. Martin went to court, said some nice things about Menjou, but he also thought it was okay to make a list of people who might be communists and not let them work. What really bothered Martin was not just Menjou's ideas. How he wanted to ruin the careers of the people he worked with even as he was doing well himself. A lot of people who knew Menjou felt the way they said he liked to tell on others. Menjou was someone who liked to inform on people. That is what bothered Martin and many others about Menjou. Number 5. Jerry Lewis, the mean clown. Jerry Lewis and Martin were partners for a time from 1946 to 1956. They were the comedy team in America. Jerry Lewis was not a nice guy even though he seemed funny and silly on stage. Jerry Lewis was really a person who liked to be in charge and make others feel bad. Martin saw this side of Jerry Lewis. It taught him a lot about Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was very hard to work with because he wanted everything to be perfect, and he would get very angry if things did not go his way. When Lewis and Martin worked together, Lewis started to take over more and more. He made Martin feel like he was not important anymore. He was really mean to the people who worked with them. After Lewis and Martin were not partners anymore, Martin said something about how people thought Lewis was funny. He had to live with a person who was really mean. People started to talk about how Lewis acted on set, and it was not good. He would get really angry, yell at people, especially the people who worked under him and the women. Lewis and Martin, they had a lot of problems. Lewis was not very nice to the people around him, especially the women and the people who worked for him. Number 6. George C. Scott, the brilliant madman. George C. Scott was a great actor who could also be very scary at times. He did jobs in movies like Patton and Dr. Strangelove. These movies are considered some of the best in cinema, and people loved him for it. He even won an Academy Award for one of them. He did not want to accept it. What people saw on screen was great. George C. Scott was also a man who got very angry and had a bad temper. This made him someone that a lot of people in Hollywood were afraid of. People who knew Dean Martin's thoughts said that Scott was a certain kind of threat. He was a talented artist, but his talent was connected to a personality that was not stable. This meant that the people around Scott often got hurt because of him. Scott's artistic genius and unstable personality were two things that went together. When you were around Scott, you had to be careful, because his personality could be bad for you. Dean Martin thought that Scott was a danger to the people around him. Martin said something about Scott that was very straightforward. If you're going to be like Patton, you have to be a little crazy. This comment really got at the idea that Scott's best performances were not something he pretended to do, but they actually came from the turmoil that was going on inside of him. The fact that Scott was unpredictable showed up in a lot of situations that people wrote about. Scott was known for doing things like punching holes in walls, throwing chairs, and even threatening to hurt the people he worked with like directors and other actors when he got angry. Martin's comment about Scott really made sense because Scott's behavior was so erratic. Scott's performances were amazing because they were real, and they came from Scott's internal struggles. The man's drinking problem made his outbursts a lot worse. This caused problems on the sets of his productions. Sometimes the entire production would come to a stop until the man's anger went away. The alcoholism was really bad for his productions. Number 7. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy is still one of the actors that people in Hollywood really look up to. He was very good at acting in a way that seemed real. People liked that about him. He also seemed like a good person when he was acting. This helped him get nominated for a lot of awards. He even won a couple of them. When you saw him in movies, he usually played characters who were people. They were smart and strong. They did not have to show off. When he was not acting, Spencer Tracy was a different person. He had a problem with drinking too much. Sometimes he would do things that were very mean and hurt people. This was very surprising because it did not seem like something he would do. Some people like Dean Martin thought that Spencer Tracy was not honest about who he was. They thought he was pretending to be a person when he was not. This made some people think that Spencer Tracy was not a good person at all. Martin said some things about Tracy that were really creepy. Tracy was a guy who could make a lot of people like him. Then he could hurt someone very badly. This shows how different Tracy was when people were watching and when they were not. People thought Tracy was a guy who made movies that showed he cared about people. When he was alone with others, he was a different person. He drank much and that made him violent. A lot of people got hurt by Tracy women. There are stories about Tracy hitting, pushing, and grabbing women when he was drunk. This even happened to Katharine Hepburn. Tracy's behavior was very bad. It happened a lot. Number 8. Sterling Hayden. Sterling Hayden was a big guy, standing 6'5", and he looked like someone you would not want to mess with. He seemed like he was born to be a movie star. People who saw him in the Asphalt Jungle, Dr. Strangelove, and The Godfather thought he was an actor because he could show a lot of feeling. Even with all his talent, Sterling Hayden did not become as famous as he could have been. This was mostly because he had a lot of problems like getting really angry and using bad things that hurt his body. He also had a time getting along with people, which made it difficult for him to work with others. Some people who knew Dean Martin said that Sterling Hayden was a sad person who hurt himself and the people around him and even messed up whole movie projects. Sterling Hayden's problems were so bad that they affected productions, and that is really sad. Number 9. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was a guy who had a kind of cool that was really popular back in the middle of the century. He had these eyes that always seemed half closed. He talked in a way that made it look easy. This made him one of the interesting leading men in movies like Out of the Past and The Night of the Hunter. Even though Robert Mitchum looked really relaxed on the outside, some people thought he was actually pretty scary. Some people who knew what Dean Martin really thought about Robert Mitchum said that he did not care about anything, and this was hiding the fact that Robert Mitchum could be really mean and sometimes even cruel. Robert Mitchum was a person, and people had different opinions about him. Martin really liked Mitchum's talent. He never really trusted Mitchum. When Mitchum was not acting, he did some things. He took many drugs, got arrested a lot, and was really mean to women. He would yell at them, even hurt them. What bothered Martin the most about Mitchum was not the bad things he did sometimes. It was that Mitchum did not seem to care about how others felt. Mitchum was often cruel to people who could not defend themselves. That was very wrong. Martin did not like that about Mitchum all. Number 10. Robert Blake. Robert Blake was a well-known guy in Hollywood a long time before he went to court for murder. He had a reputation for being of crazy. When Robert Blake was a kid, he was already. People liked him. He did a job in the movies in Cold Blood and Beretta. Robert Blake's career was also pretty unstable. Some people who knew Dean Martin said that Robert Blake had a temper, and that was a problem for a long time before something terrible happened. Robert Blake's anger was something that worried people back then. This pattern reached tragic significance in 2001 with the murder of Blake's wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley. Though acquitted criminally and found liable civilly, the case underscored concerns long whispered in Hollywood. That guy gave me the creeps way before the trial captured Martin's grim intuition. For those who had seen Blake's volatility years earlier, the tragedy was not an isolated event, but the culmination of warning signs repeatedly ignored by an industry willing to trade safety for success.